Hello, everybody. Thanks again for joining my 2012, my 12 tips in 2012. This is tip number 3. There's a bug in my library feature. So basically, how this came about, I had a customer doing sheet metal rails, basically do conveyor systems, and have a lot of cuts that go along in these rails, square cuts, hexagonal cuts, kind of non-traditional, just other than circles. So we wanted to create some library features. We wanted to include an axis as part of that feature to quickly locate other components in the assembly, rollers and the like. So we kind of found we tried to add an axis in the library feature, having an issue with that. So again, we did determine it was a bug and found a workaround. So really want to highlight a couple of things here. One is just creating a library feature to kind of educate you there, and then also if you want to include reference geometry like a plane or an axis, basically how you would work around the situation. So first things first, if you're creating a library feature, I just got kind of a dummy sheet metal part here, and basically what I want to do is start by creating a sketch point on the face here, and this is going to do two things. One is to locate the dimensional references off the edges of the part, okay? And so when I drag and drop my library feature, I'm going to be selecting basically the two edges to locate this. And it's also going to help me create the axis I want in SolidWorks. So I'll create my sketch point at this point. I'm going to go and then create an axis in SolidWorks. I'm just going to use the front face here and then the sketch point, and I'll hit OK to that. So there's my point and my axis. And then finally I'm going to come in here and use the face again to start a second sketch and actually create my square cut. So I'm going to hide the axis here because I don't want to create a reference to that unintentionally. I want to actually reference the sketch point. And maybe we'll drop a dimension for the size of this guy out here. Maybe we'll just make it 1 inch square. So we'll create a relation here. And that's going to be my cut. So I'll say extrude a cut. And maybe I set it to up to next or through all. Up to next is probably good. You can link the thickness here because this is going to be sheet metal in this case. But if you do that in a library feature, I have noticed you're going to get a message when you drag and drop your library feature in about the link that you'll have to accept, which is just kind of an annoyance. So I might just say up to next in this situation, and there's my library feature. If I show my axis again. So basically I want my library feature to consist of sketch 5 here, which is my point, axis 2, and cut extrude 4. So those three items I want to include as part of my library feature. So I'll just save here. Again, this is just kind of a dummy part that I'm using to actually create the library feature from. So how we actually create a library feature, an easy way to do that is basically just go into your design library here. There's a button up at the top that says add to library. And I can go and select the items that I'd like to add. So I'm going to choose sketch 5. Here's where if I try to pick axis 2, it's not selecting it. So I'm going to just skip that for now. And I want cut extrude 4. Okay. In your design library here, I'll just put it in my test folder. Give it a name here. Maybe we call it square, cut 1. I don't remember if I did that name before or not. What do you want to save it as? We want this to be a library feature part. Okay, so make sure you choose the correct notation here. And this is just the description field. This is where, like, if you've used library features before, you might see like drag and drop, on a flat face, yada yada yada, whatever else you want to put on there. So that'll just be the little tooltip kind of, and the pop-up that if you hover over it. So you can be very descriptive there if people don't know how to basically use the feature. Anyways, I'm going to hit OK here, and you're going to get a message saying, hey, there's features that are unrelated. Do you want to create a simplified library feature? If you hit yes, this could delete your axis out of the actual library feature part, and we don't want that. We need the axis there for our workaround. So I'm actually going to hit no to this message. Normally if you got this big beautiful model, then you say, oh hey, I want to pick a feature out of it and use it for a library feature, you might hit yes here. You don't need all that extra stuff. But in this case, I'm going to hit no, and it creates my library feature part. Um, it can get kind of confusing in SOLIDWORKS because you show the library feature part information here, but it's really still your square cut part. So usually what I do is I just close this guy down. You don't have to save it. I go into my library and find the actual part that I just created. So if I go to my test folder here, SQCut1 is the one I just created, and typically I just right click on that guy and say open. That way I know I'm in my actual library feature part. What you're going to do here though, the main thing to get our axis included here in the workaround is if you look at the features in the tree, the Sketch 5 and Cut Extrude 4, it's hard to see here, but have a little L notation on them. That basically indicates they're part of the library feature. And our workaround is just simply this. I'm just going to right click on the axis and I can say add to library. And it'll put the L on there, and simple enough, the axis will now be included as part of the library feature. Okay. Now just some general knowledge on library features. Some other things you can do is up here in these folders, the references folder basically indicates what SOLIDWORKS is going to need to place this guy. So it's going to need a placement plane. That's good. It's because I picked the same face for my two sketches. And it's going to ask me to select two edges, and that's because I dimensioned that point sketch to those two edges. So if you see other things, this is where you want to be careful and not when you build the library feature to reference like to the origin, coincident to an edge or something like that, because SOLIDWORKS is going to ask you to select that origin point or that edge to finish placing your feature. So you've got to be really careful about that. In the dimensions folder here's basically my two locating dimensions. I might recommend you rename your dimensions prior so they, if you have a lot of dimensions that you're controlling. Here's basically the dimension of the square. So what I could do here is I can drag these dimensions now into this subfolder called locating dimensions. So if I drag these two locating dimensions down in there, when I go to use the library feature again, it'll allow me to adjust that value on the fly. So I won't have to go back and edit the library feature later. Now as far as the 1-inch dimension on the square, if I just leave this one sitting where it is now, it'll actually allow me to override that if I want. You could add that to the locating dimensions, and then people could just type in the size rectangle on the fly as well. Some other things you could do here is you could go and build configurations. So if you want people to be able to pick a 1-inch, a 1 1/4, a 1 1/2, a 2-inch square, you could go and build configurations of your library feature, and then you'll have those choices first as well. So I'm not doing that here, but you could do that. Keep that in mind. Basically, we should be ready to rock and roll, so I'll hit save on the library feature part, and I'm going to close that guy. And let's just open up a test part here to give it a go. So here's something a little different. It's another sheet metal part. I want to put my square cut on this face. Let's try it out. Go to my library, find my SQCut1, there it is. I'm going to drag and drop on a face. Again, if you've never used library features before, basically what SOLIDWORKS is giving you here is this is just a preview of basically the library feature part, and it's trying to visually indicate what it's asking for now. It's asking me to pick an edge on the actual part to finish locating this. So if I go and select this edge, it then flips and says, hey, pick another edge that's similar to this. So if I pick this edge, and it'll finish locating my part. And you can see my axis, my reference point are there as part of the library feature part. Okay. Again, if you had built configurations, you could have selected them here. Here's where I can go and adjust the value on the fly if I need to, and make these 2 inches maybe, or whatever I need it to be. Here under size dimensions is where I could go and override this value if I needed to. So if I want to make that 3/4. Pretty slick a way of dropping this in, and also kind of circumvents our little bug in the library feature. How to get an axis as part of that feature. Once we hit OK, we basically have our axis, our cut, all kind of contained in the library feature item in the feature tree. So now we can locate our other components and things as needed with that axis. hopefully this has been helpful. The same would be true if sometimes people are trying to use reference planes in the library feature. You may have to do a similar approach to get a reference plane as part of your library feature. But yeah, that's how we get around a bug in our library feature. Hopefully this is helpful. We'll talk again soon.